Hello, my name is Emilio Neme, and alongside my friends, we made a game in under 48 hours for the Global Game Jam 2026, hosted by Goldsmith University. This is our second time participating as a team for a Global Game Jam, and we had so much fun the first time making this that we did it again, but this time I tried to document the process. The drill goes like this: you go to your site, you gather with your friends, and you wait for the theme to reveal. This game jam, the theme was masks! So after the theme reveal, we got right to work. And by work, I mean one of the most fun parts of a game jam, we started the brainstorming phase. So after shouting at each other for a couple seconds, we eventually settled for a more psychological interpretation of the theme. Masks as something we use to blend in. So at its core, the game is about a Panopticon prison, where the player has to move like the other inmates to blend in. So once we had a plan, everybody started working. After setting up the project in Unity, the first thing I did was a character controller. This was very important because it would be the basis for the player as well as the inmates, ensuring they moved similarly. Getting a character controller to work was simple. I basically made a very general movement script and a very general rotation script that would take inputs from other scripts. So for the player, it takes player input, and for the inmate, it just takes a very dumb script which makes it move forward. However, by this time it was getting late and one by one, my teammates left. As for myself, I needed a working prototype before calling it a day. Specifically, I wanted to work on the inmates' behavior. The goal was to make them behave like voids. I wasn't sure how to make the inmates aware of the other inmates, but what I did was basically making a sphere collider that keeps track of the inmates inside of it, giving me access to the inmates' relevant data. Therefore, I could take each of the inmates inside of the sphere's forward direction, sum them up into one single vector, and divide them by the total number of inmates. In other words, I could get the average direction. Now, each inmate can compare their own direction to the average direction of the other inmates and determine whether they should be rotating left or right. But this script is also useful for the player. It can get the dot product of the average direction with its own direction to get the blending efficacy. This is a number between 1 and -1, where the higher the number, the better you're blending in. Once I hooked up my system with the spotlight system that Alistair was working on, I could check whether the player was being watched or not. Basically, Alistair's system was a big sphere that if you're inside of, it counts as being watched. In other words, this target moved around the map, trying to catch the player off guard. So for the prototype, I made it so that if you're being watched, you take damage, eventually dying. Somehow, it worked. But it was 5 AM in the morning, and I needed a rest. So I put everything away on my luggage, except for my blanket, my pillow, and a beanbag, to go to a darker, less noisy place, and attempted to sleep as much as possible. When I woke up, I was excited about the void system, so I decided to get back at work, knowing there was a couple things I needed to fix. After taking several breaks and having breakfast, my friends started to come back, and once most of us were there, we decided to show what we had so far, so we could scope accurately for the rest of the day. The 3D model for the prison itself went through a few iterations. The player and the inmate models were coming together, and the visuals for the spotlight were looking great. But yet again, Alistair, Matvey and I decided to expand on the void algorithm. Our biggest issue was that the voids were clumping into very big groups, making the blending mechanic boring. Also, the inmates went into walls in groups and got stuck. So we tried adding avoidance, which basically makes the voids steer in other directions when they see obstacles or other inmates too close to them. But this wasn't enough to fix the issue. So I am embarrassed to say that the system didn't work, so we had to scrap most of it. But hey, that's what prototyping is for. Funnily enough though, we had already wasted lots of time, so yet again, it was very late, and our teammates left one by one. Eventually, only Alistair and I remained, and again, we were determined to getting a working version of the game before everybody came back. And maybe, when they came back, we could incorporate the art. This meant me and Alistair didn't sleep for the rest of the night. So after scrapping the void system, we kept the steering mechanic, meaning you give a desired direction to an inmate and it would lerp between its rotation towards that direction. We could use this to our advantage because now it means we can have a target that can have a random path around the map and the inmates will try to catch up to it. So with a couple of targets and a couple of paths, we could assign a random target to each inmate, giving the illusion of gangs. Meanwhile, Alistair was working on a spotlight, an alert system, and another type of inmate. These are inmates that stand in groups that look at a specific target as if they're just talking. Now that we had the main objective, we needed an ending for our game. But before that, me and Alistair had a bit of a disagreement. Alistair believed that the player needed a set of objectives to clear a level before the player moved on to another level to do it again. On the other hand, I thought the game should focus on the blending mechanic, on giving the player the feeling of paranoia when they're not blending in. Of course, it's never here nor there. The best approach is a combination of both. We were both probably visioning the same game, but disagreed on what to do first, so we focused on making the objectives and the levels. After that, for a couple hours, we were actually being very productive. However, we also had to juggle putting together everything that the artist had been working on. So immediately after finishing the first level, we ramped up the whole aesthetic of the game, so that the game could finally have a coherent look. We went from having lots of colors to just a monochromatic color palette. Alistair and I chose red and black. Red representing the light and being watched, while black representing blending in. As an exception, we used glow to represent objectives, giving the player a hint on what they can do. We were so close to having a game. All we needed now was working on the second level and then testing all together. Due to the levels of adrenaline and the lack of sleep, what seemed like minutes of implementation were hours. Then, the sun started rising. When our friends came back, they were surprised to see what we had done to the game. Fortunately, they mostly liked what we did. So while we were finishing the last level, they helped us flex out some details, some sounds, 3D models, map fixes, and some more shaders. As always, in the game's gen spirit, by the time we had something playable, there was about 3 hours left to implement sound, fix the map, add more dialogue, make the objectives more clear, balance the difficulty, playtest, make an itch.io page, and upload the game. To our best efforts, we did all those things and uploaded a couple builds, each with some small fix just before the deadline. And before we knew it, it was over. Did we win? Not really. Our game wasn't clear enough and we had some major problems. Not to mention, the WebGL version of the game didn't work. And that was it. That was the Game Jam 2026. Over. But honestly, not for me. I needed one last stretch. After getting back all the rest I lost, I finally worked on fixing some stuff, enhancing the blending system, and making things more clear. And that's it. You can check out our game at itch.io. I'll link it in the description, and it would be lovely if you could try it out.